What is going on, guys? Robert from Robert Was Here with the final part of the MBTI Foundation series, in which case we are doing the introduction into cognitive functions. And pretty much, this is MBTI as you knew it. This cool little blue crab. And he's like, come at me, bro. And this is the only thing that's standing between you and learning your type at this point. And I'm pretty sure, like, I got this. No problem. Challenge accepted. But actually, I'm lying. That little blue crab is not what you have to go through. In fact, this is the only thing standing between you and your type at this point. Are you ready, bro? You got this? Some of you might be like, is this Ninja Series? Like, for real? This is what I have to go through? This giant crab? And don't worry. I'm not serious. I'm actually joking. So, just chill. You got this. Now, this is really MBTI as you knew it. This giant raptor-like creature is called the Great Jaggy. And I have been leading you along for you to get ready for this battle. Like, if you looked at my other videos, those are like the little raptors or the Jaggy. And you went and you've bossed them. You beat them up. And now, in order to find your true type, you have to defeat MBTI as you knew it. And don't worry, you have everything that you need for this battle. I've prepared you for this if you watched my videos. And if you haven't, by all means, go back and watch the other ones. You'll be prepared. So, don't worry. You got this. I believe in you. Oh, crap. Whoa. So something's flying in, trying to get you while you're trying to find your type. But don't worry. It's just Pecco. Please. Keep trying to find your type. You're gonna be okay. So long as... Pecco? What are you doing? Pecco? Stop! Oh, guys. Oh, man. So pretty much what you've been facing has been the easy part of MBTI. But now we're actually about to get to the hard part. And someone's here. There's a new challenger, and they look pretty pissed and hungry for action. So basically, there's MBTI as you knew it in the jaws of cognitive functions. And some of you must be like, damn! And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but cognitive functions are really what's standing between you and finding your true type. And, a lot of newbies to MBTI, they just start off like, oh my gosh, I want to learn my type. I'm going to go find a free test and I'm going to find it out. And then, like, they pretty much fall at the finish line. They're like, oh man, I've taken multiple tests and gotten multiple results. I've read all the profiles and I can relate to all of them. Please help. What is my type? And then this pretty much comes into play, where you have someone asking about functions. And the newbie's like, I don't know what that is. I want to know if I'm an INFJ or an INFP. And they're like, do you use FE or FI? And they're like, what is that? I don't know. Please, just tell me whether I'm INFP or an INFJ. Now, this is the difference between finding your type with the quote-unquote letters and the quote-unquote functions. The letters, they are simpler. They're easy to look at like a graph. You can just look at it at a glance and kind of pick up what they're trying to talk about, but it's oversimplified. And when you get to the functions, it's complicated. And that's what people pretty much bypass in MBTI. They skip the complicated part and they stick to the letters. But if you look at these two pictures, notice how the art is different. The first one's very simplified, like one color, looks cartoony. But when you look at the second picture, it's a lot more depth. The colors are mixing together. It looks more realistic. And that's what you need to be focused on, is the picture on the right. Because most MBTI newbies are unaware there's a whole theory behind the letter code. So here's the iceberg picture. They're literally at the tip of the iceberg, wondering why there isn't more depth, as it's literally under them. And they just have to go look for it. So when they do find cognitive functions, it confuses the heck out of them. And they're like, I do not understand this stuff at all. I'm just going back to the letters. It's much easier finding out whether I'm a P or a J than rather I'm an introverted thinker or extroverted thinker. However, if you manage to conquer these cognitive functions, you can understand the basic principles of MBTI, and that will probably lead you to finding your type. I can't guarantee it'll help you find your type, but I can guarantee you it will show you which types you are not. I can guarantee that. And this is, of course, if you stick to the original theory. Quite frankly, guys, I've been ready to make this video since the beginning, but I've taken my time to get you up to speed, so I'm ready to get this party started. However, there's something I must address first, and if I don't, I will be guilty of being intellectually dishonest, so I'm going to go ahead and put it out there before I even start the video. Now, according to the MBTI Manual 3rd edition, not everyone is a type. And they say verbatim, for example, if for whatever reason they have not exercised one or more of their preferences, they may not have developed a type, or at least a type that they can report clearly. Not everyone is a type. And yeah, they say that. So there's proof of that in the book that you cannot have a type. So if you are one of the individuals that reads that statement and it kind of makes you feel happy because you finally have the explanation you wanted, which is why your test results were different, why the profiles all sound like you and you can relate to all of them, and that's the reason you can't find your type. If that's you, I will respond appropriately by telling you, please, just GTFO. So that statement of not everyone is a type directly contradicts that you get your type when you're born, which is a fundamental part of the theory, because you have to assume that in order for the theory to work. And because of that, it creates a paradox, which is something that sounds reasonable, but actually leads to something that isn't really acceptable as a conclusion from a logical standpoint. It's kind of like if Pinocchio were to say, my nose will grow now. Now, for those of you unaware of what Pinocchio is, it's a puppet, and when he lies, his nose grows. So when he says, my nose will grow now, he's not lying. But if it does grow, it would imply that he is lying. And that doesn't make sense, does it? And that's pretty much a paradox in a nutshell. Now, the statement of not having a type directly contradicts the presumption or the assumption that you have to assume that everyone gets a type when they're born. And that's what's creating this paradox here. So what should you do? Well, the answer is obvious. Reject the statement that not everyone is a type and accept the assumption that everyone has their preferences set at birth. And this will resolve that paradox. It's essentially like if you were going to your math class and you were telling your professor how you could divide by 0, which is something you can't do. And if you manage to divide by 0, the earth as we know it might actually end. Wow. So please don't be that guy. And I have a hypothesis for why they would say that in this book. And this is because the theory clearly states that you have a preference. And if you looked at one of my older videos with the Kamehameha example, you're going to prefer either the right hand being on top or you're going to prefer the left hand being on top. But you are going to have those individuals that are going to be like, well, why can't I be comfortable with both hands being on top? So why can't I be 50-50 on my preferences? And they're going to be wanting to be right there in the middle, pretty much to invalidate that you have a preference so they could be the quote-unquote special one. And when you get a statement like that in the book saying that not everyone is a type, they're going to take that and run with it. And I'm like, see, look, obviously the reason I can't find my type is because I'm not one of those types. I'm a new type entirely. And to those people, I would like to say, congratulations. You managed to do a Kamehameha with no hands on top. That is really awesome and is super special. Nobody else can do it. And obviously you're the 17th MBTI type. And with that being said, I will respond appropriately by telling them to GTFO and pointing them at the door. If you're one of those people, this video isn't for you. So by all means, please click off of the video now. But for everyone else, this is going to help you find your type. Or that's my intention, at least. You'll at least know what types you aren't based on functions. That much I can guarantee you. And for those who want to be that unique 17th type, why are you even using the MBTI theory in the first place if you refuse to work within the framework of the MBTI theory? After all, it's not much of a Kamehameha if it's not one hand on top and one hand on the bottom. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why you stick to the original theory. So let's call this what it is. It's a cop-out. It's for the people that are typing people, the professionals if you will, to have a out in case they get someone who's saying that they're not a type. And since the person paid money, they're trying to make sure that they're happy. Even if it fundamentally goes against the theory, which is bullshit. So stick with the theory. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get this show on the road, because this party is about to get pretty crazy. And without further ado, welcome to Cognitive Functions, which will fundamentally change the way that you see the theory. So what is a cognitive function anyway? The book describes this function or process as one of the 4 basic mental processes of sensing, intuition, thinking, and feeling. And with sensing, it seeks the fullest possible experience of what's immediate and real, otherwise empirical. Intuition seeks the furthest reaches of possible and imaginative, otherwise possibilities. Thinking seeks rational order in accordance with non-personal logic of cause and effect. And we have feeling that seeks rational order in accord with pretty much harmony, group values, personal values, etc. So the way that types are created is your preferences for judgment and perception pretty much give you this natural cognition process, if you will. And that natural process is what some people pick up when they run into individuals who are different, but they are alike in a way. And in which case you might hear something like, you know what? You remind me of so-and-so. Like, you two should meet. I think you two will get along. It's because unknowingly they're saying that you two have similar cognitive processes. And you remind me of that person. And if you two are to get together, y'all will probably get along. So a quick recap of perception. It's all the ways of becoming aware of things, people, events, or ideas. Pretty much for information gathering. And your perception functions are, of course, sensing, which wants to empirically collect data. And then you have intuition, which wants to collect data on possibilities. And then you have your judgment functions, which essentially just come to a conclusion based on what's been perceived by the perceiving functions. And you have thinking, which wants a non-personal logic associated with it, with cause and effect, pros and cons, etc. And then you have feeling, which is working on personal values, group values, cultural values, etc., etc. In other words, your MBTI type is your natural cognitive preferences. And this is what cognition is. It's thinking. Cognition is thinking. So, contrary to popular belief, your MBTI type is not, and I repeat, not about behaviors. It's about cognition. If you stick to the original theory. So here you go, guys. Here are the 8 Jungian functions. You can pause the video and you can read the definitions, but here are clear-cut definitions of what the functions are so you don't have to guess. I've given you, I guess, the theory behind the functions so you can understand the concept behind them, but here are the clear-cut definitions of them so you can fact-check me. So if I'm saying some stuff that's full of crap, you can totally call me on it. And your function preferences are kind of assigned to you at birth. You're predisposed to have your functions according to the MBTI theory. Your functions are with you when you're born. You have your preferences, and that's kind of what guides you through life. So you have your dominant function, which dominates your type. And here I have the ENFJ up, and you'll see that their dominant function is extroverted feeling in red. And you see how that oval is bigger than the rest of them? That's because this is what the ENFJs are all about. And pretty much that is the function that requires the least amount of energy. It's like if you're writing something with your right hand and you're right-handed. It's easy for you, so you'll do it no problem. Pretty much, it's like if your dominant function is your captain of your ship, and it dictates where you go. And you have your other functions, which are important, and they're members on the ship, but the captain says, hey, we're going here, and then the other functions fall in line. And that's how it's supposed to be, if you stick with the theory, of course. So your auxiliary function pretty much supports your dominant function. So if your dominant function is like Batman, your auxiliary function is like Robin. And it doesn't want to get in Batman's way. It just wants to help Batman do what Batman wants to do. So pretty much it does that, and it balances the introversion and extroversion. Because if your dominant function is extroverted, then your auxiliary function is going to be introverted. And if your dominant function is introverted, your auxiliary function is going to be extroverted. They balance each other out, just in case I said it wrong. And here's more on the auxiliary function according to Jung. You could read that and that'll tell you a little bit more, but like I said, it's not trying to get in the way of the dominant function. It's trying to let the dominant function does what it does while helping it the best way it can. And like I said, it brings balance to the introversion and extroversion, because you have your extroverted function and your introverted functions working together, depending on how they're ordered, which is like, there's a way to order them. There is a method behind ordering your functions. They are not random. Alright, so here's your tertiary function, and it's the third one down, and you see that it's smaller. You don't use this one as much as your top two. So if you're trying to find your MBTI type, please focus on the top two. That will give you your type. The tertiary function is also seen as a childish function because it's not as mature as your dominant and auxiliary functions. So you don't have a lot of control over it. And for this video, just going over the basics of cognitive functions, we're not going to worry about it too much. Just know that it's the opposite of your auxiliary function, and you have more accessibility with it than your inferior function, but you're still pretty crap at it. So yeah, there's that. And your inferior function is the function that you have the least control over, and it's the one that stresses you out the most. Pretty much think about it. If your dominant hand was right, then if you try to write with your left, you're going to really have to concentrate to do that, and you're not going to like doing it. That's your inferior function. And it's the opposite of your dominant function. And it's usually the least developed function, least experienced, immature. You just suck at using it, so you try to avoid using it when possible. Now, if you watch my earlier videos, then this is kind of like a review slash recap. But for some people, they skip straight to this, so I'm going to have to go over this. So I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go over these things again that you probably heard for like the millionth time already. So thinking is pretty much based on logical conclusions. Feeling is based off of values, beliefs, etc. And those are your judging preferences. Then you have your perceiving preferences, which is sensing, which focuses on empirical data acquired by the five senses. And then intuition focuses on possibilities, which doesn't necessarily have to be empirical data. And again, I have to go through this for people that didn't see this in the other video, so I'm sorry if you've seen it, but I'm going to go over it anyway. MBTI has its roots in psychology, so you have the subject and the object being the star that is outside of the subject being the crappy blue guy that it made, and the energy between either goes towards the object, which is object-based, or extroversion, or goes towards the subject, or subject-based, or introversion. And to finalize this concept, for those of you who watched my previous videos, while I introduced this concept to those of you who didn't, we're going to use Soul Bad Guy from Guilty Gear to explain introversion and extroversion in MBTI terms. So pretty much you have a sword, right? And the hilt is subject-based because you, the subject, grab the hilt. And then you have the guard, which is the barrier between the inner world and the outer world. And then you have the blade, which is object-based, because that's how you interact with the environment, that's how you cut things, and if you have no objects, then you can't cut anything. And pretty much, you the subject, you grab the hilt of the sword, it's for you, you don't give the hilt to your opponent, And when you're trying to cut something, you swing the sword away from you. Therefore, it's object-based. And that pretty much sums up how introversion and extroversion work in MBTI terms. So thank you, Soul Bad Guy, for this explanation of how introversion and extroversion works. So here they are, guys, your four function pairs, which never change, absolutely never change. If you stick to the theory, they never change. And pretty much there's a system for ordering them, but if you have like extroverted thinking as your dominant function, then at the bottom, you're going to have introverted feeling to balance it off. And alternatively, if you had extroverted thinking as your auxiliary function, then you're going to have introverted feeling as your tertiary function. And then whatever function is on top is going to have its opposite on the bottom. And this is, of course, if you stick to the original theory, I was giving you, I guess, like a preview of what's about to happen right now when I show it to you via the book. So pretty much here are your function pairs. Another definition of it is dangerous to go into MBTI without knowing what the function pairs are or their relationship with one another. Because that's how you come up with the 16 types. There's a system for it, as I explained a little bit earlier, but here's a visual for some of you who are more visual learners. Your dominant function is going to be the opposite of your inferior function. So with extroverted thinking being the dominant, introverted feeling is the inferior, because that's the relationship that those two preferences have. Similarly with the auxiliary and tertiary. If you have an introverted sensing auxiliary, then your tertiary is going to be extroverted intuition. You don't have to think about it. That's just the way it works. That's how they balance each other out. It's just the opposite of your auxiliary. So if you find your top two functions, you found your type. That's it. That's the goal. Find your dominant function, find your auxiliary function, and you find your type. Period. And that's, of course, if you stick to the original theory. Now, your dominant function is your most conscious function. You do this almost all of the time, and you don't even realize you're doing it. That's how much you use it. It's kind of like when you write. You don't really think about writing with your dominant hand. You just write. It's natural. But if you were to try to switch hands, then it will be very difficult. And that's what your least conscious function is like. That's what your inferior function is like. It's like, well, let me take my non-dominant hand and try to write this essay right quick. It's going to take you forever. You're probably going to get stressed out while doing so. And remember, your bottom two functions, those are the functions you're not so great at. Like, you kind of, frankly, you suck at them. Especially your inferior. Like your tertiary, you're okay with. It's like, I'm okay with it. But your inferior, generally, you suck with it. And it requires a lot of concentration for you to do, which is why you generally avoid it and why you naturally prefer your dominant function. So ask yourself, what would happen if you took someone with a dominant preference and you made them use something that they're not comfortable with? Well, if you remember me bringing up the intuition earlier, then what would happen if you took someone who naturally focuses on possibilities and you put them in a situation where they have to focus on sensory experiences? And the picture here shows the lady with the stop sign obviously unaware of the world around her because she's so focused on possibilities. Well, that's one way to interpret the picture, but that's pretty much what it's like. For intuitives, when they get into the real world per se, when they have to focus on what's really there, it's difficult for them. So sometimes they might be a little oblivious to things. And alternatively, if you took someone who's prefers sensing and who naturally focuses on sensory experiences that are based on empirical data, and you put them in a situation to where they have to focus on possibilities, it's going to be kind of hard for them. Try to get a person who prefers empirical experiences to brainstorm about a bunch of hypotheticals that don't really exist. Like, talk about what aliens could exist out in the universe. And they're going to look at you like, I don't know. I haven't seen an alien, so I can't really describe what an alien looks like. Or what they could look like, because I have no empirical basis to make this possibility out of, essentially. And the same if we were to do it with thinking. You take someone who naturally focuses on non-personal logic and you place them in a situation where they have to listen and respect subjective personal values, be it just personal values or social values, and they're gonna be like, this logically doesn't make sense, and you guys are doing it anyway, and it's gonna frustrate them. And similarly, if you were to put someone who preferred feeling and focus primarily on personal and social values, and you place them in a situation where they have to use non-personal logic, it's going to be hard for them. That's why corporate world, for those who live in America who like go work for a company, it's hard for them because you don't see customers as people. You start to see them as units sold, numbers. And for some people, that's difficult for them and it stresses them out because they're like, that's still a person. So it's pretty much like you're going against your natural preference and it's uncomfortable for you. So you're fighting yourself. Like you have your instinct to write with your right hand and you're like, no, I have to write with my left hand. And doing that requires more concentration. Except this extends beyond just writing. This is just functioning in your day-to-day life, and this might be functioning at your workplace. And eventually you're going to acquire a lot of stress if you keep doing this for a long time. And eventually you're going to boil over, and then you're going to have what they call an eruption of the inferior. Now, eruption of the inferior is where you use your inferior function, but because you're not good at using it, you are pretty awful at doing whatever it was you were trying to do. So pretty much here's the clear-cut definition of it here. I'm going to put up a picture for Naomi Quink's Was That Really Me? If you want to learn more about eruption of the inferior function, they go into it type by type, essentially. So I wholeheartedly recommend this book. I have it, and I let someone borrow it, and I didn't get it back, but I'm going to rebuy it. It's a great book. It's a great read if you like MBTI, and it might change the way you see some things. But your inferior function, for those of you who play Street Fighter or are aware of Dan, this is what it's like. You have something that someone else is good at, and you try it, and you are just absolutely suckish at it. You're horrible. You fail epically while trying to do so. And when you compare this to someone else who's used to doing this, like with their dominant or auxiliary function, well, it's no contest. Like they will murk you pretty much. This is why some people don't like games like, let's say, Call of Duty, which in case in Call of Duty, you have to make split-second reactions to kill who's ever by you. You don't have time to think about it. So for people who prefer intuition, they might not like playing Call of Duty because they have to get out of their comfort zone and use their sensing, which they're not comfortable with doing, in which case they'll probably avoid playing the game. That's a possible scenario there about how you would see that in the real world. So if you want to find your type, find your dominant function. And if you're not sure what your dominant function is or what it could be, find your inferior function. Ask yourself, what makes me uncomfortable? What requires me to have more concentration? And what cognitive function could be the cause of that? And then try it out. And that's, of course, only if you stick to the original theory. And this is also related as well. Should you focus on the external world or the inner world? And the inner world will be represented by Ryu from Street Fighter from now on. And the external world will be represented by Ken from Street Fighter from now on. So pretty much, let's say that for people who like to focus on their inner world, well, you have to be careful because overuse of introversion could hurt you as an individual. Now, if you keep focusing on your inner world or the internal world, you're going to start to become ineffective in the outer world or the external environment. Those are the people that can't get out of fantasy and they can't get into reality. You have to learn how to balance this stuff. Like, it's okay to go into your subjective world for whatever preference you have, but you also have to realize that there's an external world that you're functioning in or you need to function in order to survive. So don't fear the external world. Learn to work within the external world and still make time for your inner world. And for those who focus on the external world, if you keep focusing on the external world too much, you're not going to be too in tone with your inner world. And you might feel as though you lack substance, you're not comfortable with who you are as an individual. So you try to surround yourself in the external world with things so you don't have to focus within. And for those people, I say don't fear the internal world. You know, the external world is reality, but you're also a human being as well, and you have this internal world that you're going to have to maintain in order to function properly. So don't ignore it. You know, give it its own little time occasionally. And even though the external world and internal world seem like they're at odds and that they always fight each other, you still need both regardless. Because you do have your preference for whether you like to engage the external world or the internal world, but you're still gonna have to not neglect what your non-preference is. You got to use both, whether you like it or not, and that's how you're gonna function in the real world nicely. Because there are times where you won't be able to reach your internal world, or you won't be able to reach the external world, and you're gonna have to go for that balance there. Everything in balance. You got to find a balance between the internal and external world, regardless whether you're an introvert or extrovert in MBTI. So, by all means, find that balance. Find what works for you. What works for you will not work for everybody, but try to think about what will work for you, and that will help you out. And that's, of course, again, if you stick with the original theory. Alright, so that's pretty much the content I have for you guys on the intro to cognitive functions. I hope you learned something. I'm pretty sure you did, because this video is probably going to be long. What some of you might be thinking is, you know, I see where I made my mistake earlier with not knowing about cognitive functions, so I should type by that and not the letters. I got you. I know everything I need to know right now, and thanks for your help. And to those people, I'm going to respond appropriately by laughing at you, because I was just like you once upon a time. This is my INFJ versus INFP crisis, if you will, back in 2012 when I started to learn about MBTI. This was from my blog that I had. I took it down, but I still got all my blogs saved on my computer. So this is actually what I was going through when I was trying to figure out whether I was an INFJ or an INFP. And I feel stupid looking at it now, of course. And then eventually I did find out about cognitive functions when I went to Dave Superpowers. His channel is still up as far as I know, so if you want to go check his stuff out, I recommend it. His stuff is really great. And I said the same thing you did, where I was like, okay, I type by functions, not by letters. I got it. Thanks for your help. But I'm going to go ahead and throw that monkey wrench at you early so you don't think you understand this stuff completely. So pretty much, MBTI is not like building a robot. You're not just putting your functions on top of each other and then popping out a type. It's actually more than that. You see how a function works in one type as a dominant function? It's going to be different from if it were an auxiliary function, or if it was a tertiary function, or if it was the inferior function. They change because your dominant function pretty much controls your personality, and how you use the other functions under it is kind of filtered by how you use your dominant function. So, for example, if you have someone who uses introverted intuition as their auxiliary, if they are extroverted feeler as a dominant, they're going to use that intuition specifically for values, beliefs, etc. And if you are a extroverted thinker and you have auxiliary introverted intuition, then you're going to use that primarily for non-personal logic. And that's how it's going to support. But you're not going to use introverted intuition as a introverted intuition dominant would. So these functions work together. And that's not just the top two. All of your functions work together. And that's what makes you you. You know, when you think about MBTI, if you're thinking it's just putting you in like one little box and putting a bunch of stereotypes to you, and that's it. No. No, that's not it. Your functions work together. And they're dynamic. They're not static. So it's not like building a robot where you just put the parts together and that's it. They actually work together in a way. And that changes how the types will be seen in the real world. I hope that makes sense. But that's why this theory is rich and complex. It seems really simple, but it is really, really complex. It's really hard to understand how the types, while they have the same functions, can be so different with, let's say, environmental influences or personal influences, so on and so forth. So when I say this, I'm saying this from experience, and this is like one of my favorite Naruto quotes, from Kakashi. I'm telling you this because you don't get it. You think you get it, which is not the same as actually getting it. Get it. Guys, if this were a Pokemon game, right now, after looking at this video, you might be thinking like you're at the rival challenge at the Pokemon League, but in all actuality, you're just about to get your Pokédex and start. I've invested a great deal of time and effort to find my MBTI type. I've done all the stuff that you have. I've taken the online tests. I've read the profiles. I hit the wall. But the difference was I had to get myself out of the wall. I've looked at some YouTube videos. I had to filter through the information that was actually good and helpful and filter out all of the BS that's associated with MBTI. In my videos, I tried to cut down the BS to a minimal, if any. There's probably some. I mean, I'm human and I make mistakes, but I tried to really cut out as much as possible so you guys can get the theory in a nutshell. I've bought books. I bought the MBTI 3rd edition manual from my college for like $100. I bought Was That Really Me from Amazon. Also, on my 23rd birthday, as a gift to myself, I got professionally typed by a service based out of Australia. And I bought the e-course. I bought the most expensive thing for it. So I got to learn about the functions individually. And it changed the way that I seen MBTI. And then after getting professionally typed, I went and I got Jung's psychological types. And I'm trying to read through it. It's a dense reading for me. It requires a lot of thought for me to get through the book. But eventually I am going to make it through. So although you're right here in Palatown, just getting your Pokédex and you're getting your starter Pokemon, just remember that this is about to be one of the funnest journeys ever if you're into this type of stuff. Of course, this is not what all of you want to hear. Some of you are just like, I want to know my type like right now. And I need to know it right now. But learning about type is more than just, taking the test and reading the profiles. You have to actually go out there if you want to learn more. It's the way that I learned was pretty much through compare and contrast. To understand it, you're just going to have to constantly be around the information and go through some skepticism with some of the stuff that you read and hear, and also try to make predictions based on what you're seeing and see when it works. And eventually you'll be good, but it's a process. So finding your type isn't really all that easy. You're going to have to put in some time and effort. And trust me, you will get stuck. Oh, you will, definitely. You're going to hit some other walls. Not walls of misinformation, but just walls of, man, I really don't know about myself as much as I thought I did. Sometimes it'll be smooth sailing and things will make sense. And other times you're going to have some obstacles standing in your path. But if you stick with it and you put in enough time and effort, eventually you're going to be confident that you found your real type and it's going to make sense to you. And even when you go talk to other people, you're still going to be like, you know what? Here's some conflicting information that you're telling me, but I'm still confident about my typing. And remember, it's not always about the destination. Sometimes it's the journey getting there that's the most fun. And guys, this pretty much wraps up my MBTI basics. And this is also wrapping up my MBTI Foundation series. So I wish you good luck in finding your type. Be aware that there's going to be a lot of misinformation and misconceptions out there. And try to stick to the original theory as much as you can. And that'll help guide you through it. That'll be like your light in a forest that is dark. And you'll at least have a torch to try to navigate through it. But once you get to the other end, it's totally worth it. And you'll see how you relate to other people more. You understand yourself more and how people are different more. And you'll be able to respect those differences instead of being like, just the other. And as always, guys, this is if you stick to the original theory. So, is it any wonder that MBTI confuses people? I mean, seriously. If you're one of the people that are still asking yourself what my MBTI type is and you're trying to figure it out, stop asking yourself whether I'm introverted or extroverted. Stop asking yourself whether I'm a thinker or I'm a feeler. Stop asking yourself whether I'm a sensor or an intuitive. Stop asking yourself Am I a P or a J? These are questions that will get you nowhere in MBTI. If you want to find your type, what you need to do is learn about cognitive functions and also learn the roles that cognitive functions play in your type specifically. Learn the roles of the cognitive functions. Then start asking yourself, do I prefer introverted sensing or extroverted sensing? Do I prefer introverted intuition or extroverted intuition? Do I prefer introverted feeling or extroverted feeling? Do I prefer introverted thinking or extroverted thinking? Start asking yourself, what is my dominant function? How do I use it in my everyday life? What is my inferior function? What causes it to erupt? These are the questions. These are the questions that will eventually lead you to your MBTI type. The other questions will lead you straight to the wall, and then you'll just start making threads asking people to type you.